Well, and my question on that is, I mean, I would think that if it fails this fourth special session, there's probably a fear there. I mean, if the numbers aren't there now, I would assume that the fear grows that if he lets them go home, essentially, the ones who are against it are going to dig their heels in a little more, and then maybe ones who are on the fence might come back not supporting it. Do you think that's a concern at all? And also, if he keeps calling special sessions and it just keeps failing, I guess, like, what do you see as that? What impact do you see that has on kind of his perception in terms of how much power he has? Because I would assume that if you keep calling special session and you can't get your one policy through, you start to look weaker and weaker and weaker as it goes on.
Yeah, I think this fourth special session was all about getting it to the House floor for a vote at last, which I don't think has happened in recent history. It's almost an historic event, even if it fails, just to have that floor vote. And so I think that was the main goal of the special session for Abbott. But you're right. I mean, if we keep getting multiple special sessions, multiple House floor votes, and it's failing, I mean, that is, that makes him look weaker and weaker, and it's more embarrassing and more embarrassing. And people just get more, those opponents get more, don't think, falling off the fence one way or another. But I mean, the resistant bloc is just going to continue to get more resistance. So, I think from his perspective, politically, his best off ramp at this point is to just make good on his word to make this an issue in the primaries at this point if it fails during the fourth special session.
Interesting. Do you think Cruz plays a role in, I mean, not just in this, but also in the primary fight for it? Because I know he came out in support of it. I remember, if I'm not mistaken, there were some tweets. I don't know that he was necessarily threatening primary support. I can't remember. But kind of where does he fall in on all this?
Yeah, I expect him to be very active in these primaries on this issue. And he has been active in state house primaries before based on this issue. He's going to be, I would imagine he will be endorsing, campaigning, maybe even making independent expenditures, through his PACs for, primary challengers to House Republicans who are resistant to this. I expect him, again, he's been active on this issue in primaries before. I expect him to continue to be this cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And so Rick Perry's the other. Sorry, Brad. Rick Perry's the other one that's kind of positioning himself to get involved. Yeah, I'm with you, Patrick. I don't see his next move as anything other than, okay, we're taking it to the elections. But there's so many competing interests, and this is kind of a good transition to what Charles brought up. There's so many competing interests with the Paxton endorsements and Defend Texas Liberty and like all this other action that's going to happen in the elections. Is there a scenario where Greg Abbott is working with the Jonathan Stickland crowd and Defend Texas Liberty to take out the same person in a primary?
Yeah, I mean, that is a great question. You have multiple competing interests in some ways that are interested in that have a common goal of wanting to take out some of these House Republicans. And it begs the question that you just raised is, are they going to get behind the same candidates and effectively be strange bedfellows? Because I know to Democrats, Greg Abbott and Tim Dunn and Ferris Wilks are all the same thing. But politically, anyone who knows Republican politics in Texas knows that's not the case at all. Tim Dunn and Ferris Wilks and Defend Texas Liberty were the top funder to Abbott's primary challenger, Don Huffines, in 2022. And if you look at Greg Abbott's, his campaign finance reports, I can't remember the last time he got a significant donation from Tim Dunn or a member of the Wilks family. And so Abbott is at odds, by all appearances, with the Defend Texas Liberty wing of the party. But if he wants to get serious about getting involved in state house primaries, that may mean at least considering backing the same candidates. And then you have the Ken Paxton angle, which is, beating House incumbents who voted for impeachment. That is, Ken Paxton and Texas Liberty are largely on the same page there. But, just today, for example, you saw Ken Paxton endorse a rural Republican, Travis Clardy, probably just because Travis Clardy was very outspoken against Paxton's impeachment in the House. Clardy has otherwise been kind of an ideological enemy of the Defend Texas Liberty crowd. And so even there, you're seeing a splintering of some sorts, or at least a perceived splintering between the interests of Paxton and Defend Texas Liberty. And Clardy is also an opponent of school vouchers. And so he's on the wrong side of Abbott. And so that's a primary where you see like all these competing interests, potentially going in different directions or having to make different kinds of choices about who they may want to back or support.
So kind of backing up from the school's choice thing, but just looking at the broad view of the primaries, I guess Paxton has made it clear that he's going to be very involved. And I'd argue, and we've had this conversation around Harris County, various people, that he's much more popular, much stronger now. So how impactful do you think he's going to be in the primaries, and kind of what races are you looking at specifically? Selfishly, because I'm in Harris County, 128, 133, 138 are ones I'm looking at. Mano Diala, Lacey Hall, who welcomed Jared Woodfill as her challenger, who in his announcement said he's not only running for 133, but he's also running for Speaker of the House at the same time. And Briscoe Kane has a challenger as well. So just kind of curious about your overall take on the primaries, Paxton's influence, and maybe what races you're paying close attention to.
Well, in general, whenever you have a big name surrogate going against you, I feel like you're more vulnerable if you're a freshman member, or if you have not been through a competitive primary before, haven't had the chance to kind of flex those political muscles and build that kind of name ID with primary voters. And so when you start looking at the races that, Paxton is getting involved in, I'd probably put a little bit more of an emphasis on the incumbents he's going against who are newer to the legislature or haven't been through competitive races before. And so the race you mentioned there in Houston, I think it's Diallo's race.
Right. Yeah.
That's certainly one to watch. Obviously, he's been involved in politics personally, in the business community for a while. And so it's not like he's a freshman who, has like the lowest name ID, but he hasn't necessarily been through this kind of race before. So, he's going to have to take it seriously. Andrew Murr, who is the top House Republican on impeachment, he's been around a while, but hasn't really had a super competitive primary. And he obviously had a very central role in the impeachment. And so he's someone I'd keep an eye on as well. David Spiller is also relatively new to the legislature. I think he got here in a special election just 2 or 3 years ago. He was on the House Board of Impeachment Managers. So I think his race, and he represents a very, very conservative district. His race will be one to watch. And so, we'll see. I mean, obviously Paxton is, he's already, we're seeing, making a lot of endorsements. He's not going to win all those races. But, I think that he is, wants to just make it very clear that he is out for revenge, and that he's going to, if there's a semi-credible primary challenger against you and you voted to impeach him, there's a good chance he's going to endorse that primary challenger and at least make your race look a little more competitive than it would have been otherwise.